Most criminals, no matter what they did, sit through their trial. They show up, they answer to a jury, and the system does its job. But every once in a while, there are people so violent, so unstable, or so completely beyond the reach of normal legal proceedings that the courtroom itself becomes the problem. Today we are looking at 15 of those people, convicted killers and career criminals whose records are so extreme that even the justice system struggled to keep up. 1. Nico Jenkins. Nico Jenkins is a name that is hard to forget if you follow true crime in Nebraska. In August 2013, just days after walking out of prison following 10.5 years for carjacking and assault, he went on a 10-day killing spree across Omaha. He shot and killed 4 people, Jorge Cajiga Ruiz and Juan Uribe Pena at Spring Lake Park on August 11th, Curtis Bradford near 18th and Clark Street on August 19th, and Andrea Kruger near 168th and Fort Street on August 21st. Kruger, a 33-year-old mother of 3, had just finished a late bar shift and stopped at a McDonald's drive-thru on the way home. Jenkins and family members followed her, blocked her SUV, and shot her 4 times. So, the courtroom proceedings were exactly what you would expect from someone like him. Jenkins claimed he was acting under the command of the Egyptian serpent god Apophis, howled during hearings, laughed as prosecutors described each murder, and inflicted repeated self-injuries throughout the case. Multiple forensic psychologists disagreed sharply on whether any of it was genuine. On May 30th, 2017, a 3-judge panel sentenced him to death for all 4 murders, plus 450 years on weapons charges. Judge Peter Bataillon called it one of the worst killing sprees in Nebraska history. In March 2025, Jenkins filed a handwritten letter asking the court to schedule his execution, which his own attorney publicly described as just more of the same. 2. Thomas Edward Silverstein. Thomas Edward Silverstein, known inside as Terrible Tommy, first went to federal prison in 1975, convicted of armed robbery alongside his father and uncle. But it was what happened inside that defined everything. At the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, then the toughest federal facility in the country, Silverstein was convicted of murdering 2 rival gang members in the early 1980s. Then, on October 22, 1983, things escalated well beyond anything the Bureau of Prisons had prepared for. With another inmate slipping him a shank and a homemade handcuff key, Silverstein broke free and stabbed corrections officer Merle E. Klutz 40 times. Within hours, fellow inmate Clayton Fountain used the same method to kill a second officer, Robert Hoffman. Marion went into lockdown that same day and stayed locked down for 23 years. Because there was no federal death penalty for killing a correctional officer at the time, Silverstein received yet another life sentence. Bureau of Prisons Director Norman Carlson issued a near unprecedented no human contact order, so guards were instructed not to speak to him. He was eventually moved to ADX Florence in Colorado, a supermax partly designed in direct response to his crimes. He died there on May 11, 2019, at 67, after complications from heart surgery, having spent 36 consecutive years in solitary confinement. 3. Jaime Osuna. Jaime Osuna's face is almost entirely covered in tattoos, a pentagram on his forehead, and a Joker-style smile inked across his cheeks, and his crimes match that image. In November 2011, the body of Yvette Pena, 37 and a mother of 6, was found in room 19 of the El Morocco Motel in Bakersfield, California. She had been gagged, tortured, and left with multiple stabbing instruments in her back. Osuna pleaded guilty in 2017 and received life without parole. At sentencing, he gave the judge a thumbs up on his way out. Less than 2 years into that sentence, he killed again. His cellmate at Courtroom State Prison, Luis Romero, 44, had only been transferred there on March 7, 2019. 2 days later, guards found Romero dead during a morning check. Osuna had used a razor blade wrapped in string to torture and behead Romero overnight. Prosecutors believed Romero was conscious for at least part of it. Not just that, he had removed an eye, a finger, and a portion of a lung, made a necklace from the body parts, and written in blood across the walls. Assistant Kings County DA Phil Esbenshade publicly called it the most gruesome case he had ever seen. New charges of murder, torture, and mayhem were filed. But a judge ruled Osuna incompetent to stand trial after diagnoses of schizophrenia spectrum disorder, antisocial personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder, and he was transferred to the psychiatric inpatient program at Salinas Valley State Prison. 4. David Chalouet. In late August 2011, 3 men from Pittsfield, Massachusetts disappeared. David Glasser, 44, Edward Frampton, 58, and Robert Chadwell, 47, had sheltered together at Glasser's apartment during Tropical Storm Irene. 2 weeks later, their dismembered bodies were found buried in a trench in Beckett, Massachusetts. Each had been shot and then cut apart, apparently to make identification harder. It became the single largest investigation in Berkshire County history. David Chalouet, 47, of North Adams, was one of 3 men charged in the killings. The motive was witness intimidation. Glasser was scheduled to testify against Adam Lee Hall, a Hells Angels member facing serious charges, so Frampton and Chadwell were killed to eliminate them as witnesses. All 3 trials were moved to Hampden Superior Court in Springfield. Chalouet's jury deliberated over 5 days, and there was a tense moment when one juror reversed her verdict during individual polling on Thursday afternoon. The judge sent the jury back to deliberate, and by Friday, May 16, 2014, they returned unanimous guilty verdicts on all 9 counts, 3 each of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and witness intimidation. On May 19, 2014, Judge C. Jeffrey Kinder sentenced Chalouet to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Through his attorney, Chalouet offered condolences to the victims' families while maintaining he disagreed with the verdict. 5. Caius Veiovis. Of the 3 men convicted in the Pittsfield murders, Caius Veiovis was by far the most striking figure to walk into a courtroom. Born Roy Gutfinski Jr., he had legally changed his name in 2008 while serving time in a Maine prison, saying it was inspired by the Roman emperors Caligula and Nero and an Etruscan daemon. By the time he stood trial in Massachusetts, he had subdermal horn implants in his forehead, a 666 tattoo between them, sharpened teeth, a split tongue, and facial tattoos covering nearly every surface of his face. Veiovis was the 3rd and final co-defendant tried for the murders of Glasser, Frampton, and Chadwell. Prosecutors argued he was a key participant in the plot to silence Glasser before Hall's trial. The jury deliberated for more than 36 hours across 6 full days before returning guilty verdicts on all 3 counts of first-degree murder, plus 3 counts each of kidnapping and witness intimidation. When the verdict came in, Veiovis turned to face the jury and told them he would see them all in hell, according to courtroom accounts. At sentencing on September 29, 2014, he declared his innocence before Judge C. Jeffrey Kinder and made clear he had no intention of asking for mercy. He received 3 consecutive life terms without parole, plus concurrent 8 to 10-year terms on the remaining charges, and the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court later denied his appeal in a 3-2 split decision. 6. Bass Webb. Bass Webb was convicted of murdering 2 different girlfriends years apart, and his courtroom behavior was just as alarming as the crimes. On July 31, 2009, he forced his way into the Cynthiana, Kentucky, home of his ex-girlfriend, 32-year-old Bria Runowitz, a former Bourbon County Jail employee 3 days from starting a federal job. Her 2 daughters, aged 7 and 8, were asleep in the next room. Webb raped and decapitated her, left her body on the couch, then drove to the Bourbon County Detention Center parking lot in Paris and tried to run over a deputy sheriff and a pretrial officer with a geo-tracker. His time in court went exactly as expected. He spat on District Judge Vanessa Dixon at his arraignment, participated in a riot at the Fayette County Detention Center, and showed up to a later hearing with a skull tattoo listing people he wanted to kill. He was sentenced to 50 years in September 2012 for Runowitz's sexual assault and murder, and 37 years for the 2 attempted murders. Back in 2003, Webb had also choked another girlfriend, Sabrina Vaughn, to death in Montgomery County and buried her in Powell County, where her remains turned up in 2010. A jury convicted him on April 12, 2017, and a judge sentenced him to life on May 18, consecutive to the 50 years he was already serving. When asked to stand for the sentence, Webb refused. The judge sentenced him anyway. 7. Rodney Alcala. Rodney Alcala was handsome, well-educated, and a trained photographer who had studied film at New York University. In September 1978, right in the middle of his killing spree, he appeared on The Dating Game, introduced as a successful photographer who enjoyed skydiving and motorcycling. He won the date, but the bachelorette backed out after meeting him backstage because of his unsettling demeanor. Her instincts were right, because Alcala had already killed multiple women by then, and would keep going until his arrest in July 1979. An Orange County jury convicted him of 5 California murders. Jill Barkham, 18, killed November 10, 1977. Georgia Wickstead, 27, killed December 16, 1977. Charlotte Lamb, 32, killed June 24, 1978. Jill Parenteau, 21, killed June 14, 1979. And Robin Samso, 12, abducted June 20, 1979 while riding her bike to ballet class in Huntington Beach. He represented himself at trial, which did nothing in his favor, and was sentenced to death on March 30, 2010. In January 2013, Alcala pleaded guilty to 2 additional murders in New York: the 1971 killing of TWA flight attendant Cornelia Crilly, and the 1977 killing of aspiring conductor Ellen Jane Hover, and received 25 years to life for each. Alcala died on July 24, 2021 at the age of 77 from natural causes at a hospital near Courtroom State Prison, his California death sentence never carried out because of the state's moratorium on executions. 8. Kristen Gilbert. Kristen Gilbert was a registered nurse at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Northampton, Massachusetts, and by the time her co-workers started calling her the Angel of Death, it was no longer a joke. Between January 1995 and February 1996, the death rate in Ward C surged enough that 3 nurses formally reported their concerns. Prosecutors argued she was on duty for roughly half of the 350 deaths at the hospital since 1989. She was injecting epinephrine into patients' IV bags to trigger cardiac arrests, then responding to the emergency herself. Her then-boyfriend, James Perot, was a VA police officer required to attend every medical emergency in the ward, so prosecutors said she created the crises partly to see him. Her confirmed victims were veterans: Stanley Jagodowski, Henry Hudon, Kenneth Cutting, and Edward Squira. Her trial opened in Springfield, Massachusetts on October 16, 2000. After 83 hours of deliberation across 12 days, the jury found her guilty on March 14, 2001 on 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, and 2 counts of attempted murder. Because the crimes occurred on federal property, she faced the federal death penalty, even though Massachusetts had abolished it. The jury could not reach a unanimous death recommendation, and on March 27, 2001, Judge Michael Ponsor sentenced her to 4 consecutive life terms without parole, plus 20 years for a prior bomb threat. She has been held at FMC Carswell in Fort Worth, Texas, ever since. 9. Levente Laszlo Lazar. Levente Laszlo Lazar was 27 and living in Bloomington, Indiana, when he drove over 2,400 miles to Grover Beach, California, to visit his 64-year-old mother, Athena Valentini, a licensed vocational nurse at the California Men's Colony. On October 24, 2018, he stabbed her 10 times in the neck at her South 9th Street condominium, took some of her belongings, and drove back to Indiana using a prepaid burner phone to avoid leaving a traceable record. A welfare check by Grover Beach police the following day found Valentini's body. No murder weapon was found. What built the case against Lazar was his own digital trail. On the drive back to Indiana, before anyone had found the body, he was already searching online for news about his mother's death. Investigators found the original of her will at his Indiana home, naming him as the sole beneficiary, and prosecutors argued at trial that he killed her to liquidate her estate and cover tax liens, student debt, and an upcoming wedding. The jury convicted him of first-degree premeditated murder on October 21, 2019, after a 3-week trial at San Luis Obispo County Superior Court, and also found true a special circumstances allegation that the murder was committed for financial gain. On December 11, 2019, Judge Matthew Guerrero sentenced Lazar to life without the possibility of parole at San Luis Obispo County Superior Court, the first such sentence handed down in that county in over 6 years. 10. John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was known in Norwood Park Township as a generous contractor and local political figure who dressed as a clown called Pogo at charitable events and children's hospitals. He had been photographed with First Lady Rosalind Carter on May 6, 1978. So when investigators searched the crawl space beneath his home at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue in December 1978, what they found was staggering. 26 bodies buried there, 3 more elsewhere on the property, and 4 pulled from the Des Plaines River. Gacy had been killing since 1972, luring young men and boys with the promise of construction work, tricking them into handcuffs under the guise of a magic trick, then raping, torturing, and strangling them. His first victim was 16-year-old Timothy McCoy. He killed 32 more over the following 6 years. His trial began February 6, 1980, with a jury selected from Rockford because of the local media coverage. And after 5 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated 1 hour and 50 minutes before convicting him of all 33 murders on March 12, 1980. The following day, the same jury deliberated 2 hours and 15 minutes on punishment and recommended death. Judge Louis Garippo sentenced Gacy to death on March 13, 1980. He spent 14 years on death row painting clown portraits that sold for thousands of dollars while filing appeal after appeal, none of which prevailed. He was executed by lethal injection at Stateville Correctional Center in Joliet, Illinois, on May 10, 1994. 11. Dennis Rader. Born on March 9, 1945, in Pittsburgh, Kansas, Dennis Rader spent decades hiding in plain sight as a church president, a compliance officer, and a family man. Underneath all of that was one of the most methodical serial killers in American history, and he called himself BTK, which stood for bind, torture, kill. His first murders happened on January 15, 1974, when he broke into the Otero family home in Wichita, Kansas, and killed 4 members, including the parents, Joseph and Julie, and 2 of their children, 9-year-old Joseph Jr. and 11-year-old Josephine. Over the next 17 years, he killed 6 more people, mostly women, strangling them in their homes. Between murders, he sent taunting letters to local media and police describing his crimes in detail, then went quiet in 1979 for over a decade. He resurfaced in 2004, and that arrogance caught him. He sent a floppy disk to a local Fox television station. Police traced the metadata back to his church computer, and he was arrested on February 25, 2005. He pleaded guilty to all 10 murders on June 27th, and on August 18th, Judge Gregory Waller sentenced him to 10 consecutive life terms, a minimum of 175 years, the maximum Kansas law allowed. At sentencing, Rader delivered a rambling 20-minute statement widely described as self-congratulatory rather than remorseful, and the victims' families rejected it entirely. He is currently held at El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. 12. Wayne Couzens. Wayne Couzens was a Metropolitan Police firearms officer assigned to guarding the U.S. Embassy in London, so people were supposed to be able to trust him. On March 3, 2021, 33-year-old Sarah Everard was walking home near Clapham Common in South London when Couzens approached, flashed his police warrant card, and handcuffed her under the false pretense she had violated COVID-19 restrictions. Prosecutors established that Couzens spent at least a month planning this, making unexplained trips to London to scout locations and buying a handcuff key on February 10th. On the day of the abduction, he finished a 12-hour shift at the US Embassy, picked up a rental car in Dover, and drove roughly 80 miles into London to find his victim. After handcuffing Everard, he drove her back to Kent, raped her near Dover, and strangled her with his police-issue belt. He burned her body in a freezer at Hodes Wood near Ashford and dumped remains in a pond nearby. Police dogs found her body on March 10th. Couzens was arrested on March 9th after investigators traced the rental car through CCTV. He pleaded guilty to kidnapping and rape on June 8th and to murder on July 9th. On September 30th, 2021, Lord Justice Fulford sentenced him to a whole life order at the Old Bailey, ruling his abuse of police authority was as serious as a murder to advance a political or ideological cause. His appeal was rejected in July 2022. 13. Zane Peora Wallace. Zane Peora Wallace was a Hells Angels gang prospect from Wanganui, New Zealand, and by the time Jasmine Wilson died on August 2, 2019, she had spent the final 9 months of her life being threatened, assaulted, and terrorized by him. Wilson was a 30-year-old mother of 2, Court testimony established that Wallace made repeated explicit threats throughout that period, telling her he intended to kill her, slit her throat, and beat her head in. Some of those threats were captured on recorded prison phone calls, so prosecutors had them on tape. On July 31, 2019, Wilson's battered and unconscious body was dumped at Whanganui Hospital's emergency department. She suffered severe head injuries, was transferred to Wellington Hospital, and died 2 days later on August 2nd. Wallace's father discovered her body after Wallace called for help, and his mother, father, and sister were all subsequently convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice. Wallace contested the charge for years, but on July 25, 2022, the day his retrial was set to begin in the High Court in Whanganui, he pleaded guilty before a jury was even selected. Justice Francis Cook sentenced him on September 16, 2022, to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 15 years and 6 months. 14. Adam Lee Hall. Adam Lee Hall was a ranking member of a Western Massachusetts Hells Angels chapter based out of Peru, Massachusetts, and by 2011 he had become fixated on eliminating a man named David Glasser because Glasser was due to testify against him in a pending assault case. So Hall's solution was to make sure Glasser never reached that witness stand. On the night of August 27th into 28th, 2011, Tropical Storm Irene was bearing down on the region, and Glasser, along with 2 friends, Edward Frampton and Robert Chadwell, were sheltering together at Glasser and Frampton's Linden Street apartment in Pittsfield. Hall, along with co-conspirators David Chalu and Caius Viovis, abducted all 3. Prosecutors established that Glasser was targeted to silence him, and because Frampton and Chadwell were simply present, they were killed as well, so no witnesses remained. The 3 men were shot, dismembered with a power saw, and buried in a trench on private property in Beckett, Massachusetts, where police found the bodies on September 10, 2011. Hall was tried in Hampton Superior Court in Springfield and convicted on February 7, 2014, on 15 of 19 charges, including 3 counts of first-degree murder. 3 days later, on February 10, Judge C. Jeffrey Kinder sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, noting that Glasser had a mental disability that made him particularly vulnerable and that the crimes were filled with depravity. Hall showed no reaction. 15. Michael Campbell. Michael Eugene Campbell, a career criminal, is one of the most visually striking criminal histories in recent memory. Campbell's face is almost entirely covered in tattoos, including an inverted pentagram on his forehead, Celtic-style ink across his temples and cheeks, and a polka-dot bow tie across his throat. His appearance is only part of it, because the criminal record beneath spans multiple states and nearly 3 decades. His earliest documented major offense came in Denver, Colorado, in October 1994, charged with attempted first-degree sexual assault. From there, his record grew across Colorado, California, and eventually Missouri, accumulating charges for robbery, property damage, assault, failing to register as a sex offender, being within 500 feet of a park as a registered offender, and violating protection orders. By 2013, he was back in Greene County Jail in Springfield, with 2 open felony cases pending. The most serious charge came in 2021. Campbell allegedly entered a Springfield home on May 30th, walked into a bedroom where a woman was sleeping next to her boyfriend, and began assaulting her. The boyfriend woke up and chased him out. Campbell was arrested nearby on a bicycle he had painted gold over its original blue. Prosecutors charged him with first-degree attempted rape and classified him as a persistent sexual offender under Missouri law, a designation carrying the possibility of life imprisonment without parole. If you made it to the end, drop a comment and tell me which case stood out to you the most, because the responses are always interesting. And if you want more videos like this one, subscribing really does help the channel grow, so that we can keep putting these together. See you in the next one. The courtroom is supposed to be where justice is served, not where it's executed. But for these gang leaders, it became their final destination. These are criminals who walked into court expecting a trial and walked out in a body bag. These are gang leaders instantly killed in court. Case 1. Ganamula Sanjeewa. This is Sanjeewa Kumara Samaratne, better known as Ganamula Sanjeewa, a notorious drug trafficking leader who controlled one of Sri Lanka's most violent criminal organizations. Sanjeewa, 34, was facing 19 separate murder cases and numerous charges related to drug trafficking, extortion, and organized crime. The most serious of these crimes involved running a sophisticated drug network that operated throughout Sri Lanka and extended to international territories. In addition to these charges, Sanjeewa had built a reputation for extreme violence against rivals and witnesses, with intelligence agencies receiving credible threats that organized crime figures wanted him eliminated. These crimes occurred over more than a decade, with Sanjeewa maintaining a powerful position in Sri Lanka's criminal underworld. The legal proceedings against Sanjeewa began after his arrest in September 2023 at Bandaranaike International Airport. His arrest came when authorities discovered he was traveling with a forged passport after returning from Nepal. He was remanded to Busa high-security prison, where he awaited trial on multiple charges. On February 19, 2025, Sanjeewa was scheduled to appear in Courtroom No. 9 at Colombo District Court for a non-summary investigation. Prison officials brought him to Courtroom No. 5 instead, citing the need for a separate re-imprisonment order hearing. At approximately 9:40 that morning, as Sanjeewa stepped into the dock, a gunman disguised as a lawyer rose from the attorney section and fired multiple shots at close range. The shooter, 27-year-old Samindu Dilshan Piyumanga Kandanarakchi, was a former army commando who had been hired by an organized crime figure based in Dubai. His 25-year-old accomplice, Ishara Sowandi Weerasinghe, had smuggled the revolver into the courthouse inside a hollowed-out copy of the Code of Criminal Procedure. The assassination had been planned in detail, with the attackers conducting a dry run days before the shooting. Sanjeewa was rushed to Colombo National Hospital with critical injuries but was pronounced dead on arrival. The shooter fled the courtroom and left the court complex before security could seal the exits. He took a taxi to a clothing store in Nujagoda, changed his clothes, and attempted to escape. Police arrested him hours later in Puttalam in the northwestern region. Authorities also arrested Police Constable Lahiru Prasanna Athugala for aiding the conspirators, revealing the depth of corruption that enabled the courtroom assassination. Case 2. Jitendra Gogi. This is Jitendra Man, alias Gogi, a gang leader whose criminal organization terrorized Delhi's national capital region for over a decade. Gogi, 30, was facing 19 separate criminal cases, including murder, attempted murder, extortion, robbery, and conspiracy. The most serious of these crimes occurred over several years, as his organization engaged in a violent gang war with the rival Tilu Tajpuria faction. This conflict began with a 2010 Delhi University student election dispute, but escalated into a full-scale war that left numerous bodies across Delhi. In addition to these charges, Gogi was suspected in the 2017 murder of Haryanvi singer Harshita Dahiya and the 2020 killing of Pawan Thakur, who was shot 48 times. These crimes occurred while Gogi maintained a powerful position in Delhi's organized crime network, with authorities offering a reward of 6.5 lakh rupees for his capture. The legal proceedings against Gogi were ongoing when he was brought to Rohini Court Complex on September 24, 2021. He had been in custody since his March 2020 arrest after a 4-year manhunt. Prosecutors were building cases against him for multiple murders and violent crimes committed by his organization. On that day, Gogi was scheduled for a hearing in Courtroom 207. He was brought under heavy security escort, including commandos from the counterintelligence team of the Special Cell, because his associate had previously escaped from custody at a different court. At approximately 11:45, within 5 minutes of Gogi entering the courtroom, 2 men dressed as lawyers opened fire. The assassins, identified as Rohit and Jaga, were members of the rival Tilu Tajpuria gang. They had disguised themselves in complete lawyer attire, including collar bands, black blazers, and trousers, to gain access to the courtroom. At least 10 gunshots rang out as the attackers fired at Gogi at close range. The counterintelligence team members immediately returned fire in what witnesses described as controlled and calibrated counterfire. All 3 men, Gogi, and both attackers, were declared brought dead at the hospital. A young female law intern sustained bullet injuries during the crossfire. The incident sparked outrage about security lapses at Rohini Court, with Delhi Police Commissioner Rakesh Asthana acknowledging failures in the security protocol and ordering an investigation. Case 3. Akku Yadav. This is Bharat Kalicharan Yadav, known as Aku Yadav, a gang leader who terrorized the Kasturba Nagar slum in Nagpur for over 13 years. Aku, 32, was facing 26 criminal cases, including murder, serial rape, molestation, extortion, home invasion, and robbery. The most serious of these crimes involved the rape of over 40 women and girls, with his youngest victim being just 10 years old. In addition to these charges, Aku was accused of killing at least 3 people, including his best friend Avinash Tiwari in 1997 and a woman named Asha Bhagat in 1999. These crimes occurred over more than a decade, with Aku maintaining power through violence, intimidation, and bribing local police officers. Despite being arrested more than 14 times, he was repeatedly released, either through bail or by manipulating the legal system. The legal proceedings against Aku began in August 2004 after he raped a young girl and threatened 25-year-old Usha Narayan with acid when she reported his crimes to police. On August 6th, angry women from the slum attacked his house, forcing him to seek police protection. Police arrested him on August 7th, though there was controversy about whether he surrendered or was forcibly taken into custody. A bail hearing was scheduled for August 13, 2004 at Nagpur District Court. Word spread through the community that Aku would likely be released, following the pattern that had protected him for years. On the afternoon of August 13th, approximately 200 women gathered at Courtroom number 7. Many were his direct victims or residents who had lived under his terror. When Aku entered the courtroom around 2:30, he saw a woman he had raped and mocked her, calling her a prostitute and saying he would rape her again. The police officers accompanying him laughed at his comment. The woman stood up and began hitting him with her footwear. The crowd of women overwhelmed court security and attacked Aku with vegetable knives and chili powder they had brought from home. The mob stabbed him at least 70 times as police officers fled the courtroom. One woman hacked off his penis with a kitchen knife. He died on the floor of courtroom number 7. Police initially arrested 5 women, but over 200 women went to the police station and collectively claimed responsibility. In November 2014, all 18 remaining accused were acquitted for lack of evidence. Case 4. Siale Angilau. This is Sial Angilau, a 25-year-old member of the Tongan Crip gang based in Salt Lake City. Angilau faced federal racketeering conspiracy charges and multiple violent crimes spanning several years. The indictment alleged his involvement in convenience store robberies across Salt Lake City between December 2002 and July 2007, where he and his associates assaulted store clerks. He was also charged with assaulting a federal officer, establishing him as a key figure in the gang's organized criminal activities. On April 21, 2014, Angilau appeared in federal court for his racketeering trial. He was one of 9 alleged Tongan Crip gang members charged in a 2010 indictment. The trial had just begun, with testimony focusing on the gang's recruitment methods and violent activities. Viola Mataele Tenifa, a former gang member testifying for the prosecution, described how boys as young as 9 were recruited and forced to commit beer thefts, robberies, and shootings against rival gang members. Tenifa had been on the stand for approximately 22.5 minutes when the violence erupted. Angilau had convinced Judge Tenor Campbell to leave him unshackled, arguing that restraints would prejudice the jury. The judge agreed because the new federal courthouse lacked table drapes to hide shackles. Some U.S. Marshals were unaware of this arrangement due to poor communication. As Tenifa testified, Angilau suddenly stood up, grabbed a pen from the defense table, and charged across the courtroom. Someone shouted warnings, but before anyone could react, Angilau sprinted toward the witness stand and leaped headfirst with his right arm raised to strike. Tenifa, who was shackled, backed away as Angilau vaulted over the witness stand with the pen in hand. At that exact moment, a U.S. Marshal fired 4 shots at close range. The bullets struck Angilau in the chest. He collapsed in the witness box. The entire attack took approximately 5 seconds. Angilau was rushed to a hospital but died hours later. Judge Campbell declared a mistrial, noting the jury was visibly shaken. The FBI investigated and concluded in July 2014 that the 4 shots were justified, finding the use of force was within agency policy. Video of the incident was released in March 2018 after a lengthy court battle. A federal judge granted summary judgment to the defendants and dismissed excessive force claims brought by Angilau's family. Case 5. Atiq Ahmed and Ashraf Ahmed. These are Atiq Ahmed and his brother Khalid Azim, known as Ashraf. Atiq Ahmed was born in 1962 to a poor family in Allahabad, where his father drove a horse cart. He entered crime by stealing coal from trains, later escalating to threatening contractors for government tenders. His first criminal record came in 1979 for murder in Prayagraj. He became the first person booked under the Gunda Act in Uttar Pradesh. After the 1990 encounter killing of his competitor Shaukat Ilahi, Ahmed became extremely powerful in Allahabad's underworld. He built a criminal empire through extortion, kidnapping, and murder, while simultaneously pursuing politics. He entered politics in 1989, winning Allahabad West as an independent candidate, later joining the Samajwadi Party. In 2004, he was elected to parliament from Fulpa. By March 2023, authorities had seized properties worth 11,684 crore rupees belonging to Ahmed and his family. He faced more than 160 criminal cases, including the 2005 murder of political rival Raju Pal. He was convicted in 2019 for kidnapping a witness and remained in jail. His brother Ashraf was also an ex-legislator with deep ties to organized crime. In early 2023, Ahmed was held at Sabarmati Central Jail in Gujarat. On March 26th, Uttar Pradesh police brought him to Prayagraj for a hearing in the Umesh Pal murder case. Umesh Pal, a key witness in the Raju Pal case, had been shot dead with his 2 police guards on February 24th. Ahmed filed a Supreme Court petition expressing fear he might be killed in a fake encounter. The court dismissed his plea, stating the state machinery would take care of him. Ashraf told reporters a senior officer had threatened to kill him within 2 weeks. On April 15, 2023, Ahmed and Ashraf were escorted by police for a court-mandated medical checkup. Outside Motilal Nehru Divisional Hospital, journalists stopped them. Ahmed was asked about missing his son's funeral and replied, "They didn't take him." Before Ashraf could complete his statement, 3 men posing as media personnel opened fire at point-blank range. A pistol was fired directly at Ahmed's head. Both brothers were handcuffed. The attack was captured on live television. Ahmed died instantly. Ashraf was also killed. The 3 perpetrators, identified as Arun Maurya, Sunny Singh, and Lovalesh Tiwari, chanted Jai Shri Ram while surrendering. All 3 were arrested and sent to 14-day judicial custody. A 3-member judicial inquiry was formed. The killings sparked outrage. Critics pointed to over 180 people killed in so-called police encounters in Uttar Pradesh in recent years. Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath ordered a high-level probe, and Section 144 was imposed across multiple districts. Case 6. Sanjeev Maheshwari Jiva. This is Sanjeev Maheshwari, known throughout Uttar Pradesh by his alias Jiva. Maheshwari had been involved in serious organized crime since 1995, leading an interstate gang facing charges in multiple cases spanning murder, extortion, robbery, dacoity, kidnapping, and racketeering. His criminal activities stretched across state lines, with his name linked to kidnapping a businessman's son in Kolkata, where a ransom of 2 crore rupees was demanded. He was closely associated with mafia dons, Mukhtar Ansari and Prem Prakash Singh, also known as Munna Bajrangi. The most serious charges involved the assassinations of legislators Krishnanand Rai and former Minister Brahmadutt Dwivedi. Krishnanand Rai, a Bharatiya Janata Party legislator, was murdered in circumstances pointing to organized crime. Brahmadutt Dwivedi, a former Uttar Pradesh cabinet minister and senior BJP leader, was shot dead in Farrukhabad district in February 1997. By 2023, Maheshwari faced 24 criminal cases and was serving a life sentence in Lucknow jail. His name spelled terror among businessmen, company owners, contractors, and government officials. After the 2018 jail murder of Munna Bajrangi, Maheshwari claimed his life was under threat. In 2021, his wife Payal wrote to the Chief Justice of India, stating her husband's life was in danger. On June 7, 2023, Maheshwari was brought from Lucknow jail to civil court for a hearing in a 2015 case involving murder, attempted murder, and violations of the Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Act. Around 3:50 in the afternoon, as Maheshwari was escorted to the courtroom, an assailant dressed as a lawyer approached. Eyewitnesses saw the man pull out a firearm near the courtroom door and open fire at close range. 8 bullets were fired. 6 struck Maheshwari's chest. two hit his hand. The shooting occurred in rapid succession, with blood splattered across the area. In the crossfire, an 18-month-old girl named Laxmi was seriously injured and admitted to intensive care. A constable named Lal Muhammad also sustained injuries. Maheshwari collapsed immediately. The post-mortem revealed 16 bullet entry and exit points in his body. Police apprehended the assailant, identified as Vijay Yadav from Jaunpur district. The incident triggered massive protests from lawyers who questioned security arrangements and alleged police failure. Senior police officers rushed to the scene with provincial armed constabulary personnel and approximately 100 officers. Case 7. Munna Bajrangi. This is Prem Prakash Singh, known throughout Uttar Pradesh by his feared alias, Munna Bajrangi. Bajrangi, 51, was facing more than 24 separate criminal cases, spanning murder, attempted murder, extortion, and organized crime activities that stretched across multiple Indian states. The most serious charges involved the brutal assassination of Bharatiya Janata Party legislator Krishnanand Rai in November 2005, when Bajrangi and his associates fired over 400 bullets from 6 AK-47 rifles, killing Rai and 6 others traveling in 2 vehicles. In addition to these charges, Bajrangi was a key member of the notorious Mukhtar Ansari gang, operating in the districts of Bhadohi, Mao, Ghazipur, Varanasi, and Jaunpur. These crimes occurred over 2 decades, with Bajrangi maintaining a powerful position in Uttar Pradesh's criminal underworld and even attempting political office while imprisoned. The legal proceedings against Bajrangi had been ongoing since his arrest in 2009 in Mumbai, where he had been living under his real name with his wife and 3 children since 2003. He was convicted in the Krishnanand Rai murder case and remained in custody, serving a life sentence. By 2018, authorities were building additional cases against him for extortion and other violent crimes. On the 8th of July, 2018, late in the evening, around 9:30, prison officials transferred Bajrangi from Jhansi jail to Bagpat district jail in preparation for a court appearance scheduled for the following morning. The transfer itself raised suspicions, as it occurred on a Sunday evening when such movements were unusual. Just a week before his death, Bajrangi's wife, Seema Singh, had held a press conference warning that her husband's life was in danger, predicting he would be killed. In the early morning hours of the 9th of July 2018, around 5:30, Bajrangi was shot inside the Bagpat jail premises by fellow inmate Sunil Rathi, another gangster who claimed he killed Bajrangi after an argument. Rathi fired 7 to 10 bullets into Bajrangi's head at close range within the jail compound. The shooting occurred just hours before Bajrangi was scheduled to appear in court for his extortion case hearing. Prison officials discovered the body and immediately launched an investigation into the massive security failure that allowed an inmate to obtain a firearm inside the facility. Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath ordered an immediate judicial inquiry and suspended 6 jail officials for gross negligence. The Central Bureau of Investigation later took over the case, uncovering evidence of deep corruption and a conspiracy that enabled the murder. Sunil Rathi was arrested and charged with murder, while authorities continued investigating how he obtained the weapon and whether outside forces orchestrated the killing to prevent Bajrangi from testifying in upcoming cases. Case 8. Christopher Thomas Vaughan. This is Christopher Thomas Vaughan, a 35-year-old resident of Oxford, North Carolina. Vaughan was on trial for misdemeanor false imprisonment charges stemming from an incident at a Walmart parking lot. The charges involved allegations that he had attempted to stop and detain someone against their will, behavior that escalated into criminal proceedings in Person County District Court. While the charges themselves were relatively minor compared to violent felonies, Vaughan's behavior during his trial would transform a routine misdemeanor hearing into a deadly confrontation. The trial proceedings began on the 9th of September 2021 before District Court Judge Caroline Burnett at the Person County Courthouse in Roxborough. Vaughan was being represented by court-appointed attorney Keista Pass, but tensions quickly emerged between the defendant and his counsel. During the trial, Vaughan became increasingly agitated with his attorney's performance, loudly complaining to Judge Burnett that he felt inadequately represented. When he demanded a new lawyer, the judge informed him that his only options were to continue with Pass or represent himself. Pass, recognizing the deteriorating situation, requested permission to withdraw from the case, telling the judge that Vaughan appeared quite skilled at self-representation. Judge Burnett allowed the withdrawal and instructed Vaughan to proceed with questioning witnesses. As Vaughn attempted to cross-examine the victim and later challenged a police officer's testimony, his frustration mounted. He insisted repeatedly that the proceedings were illegal because he had no legal counsel, despite having just rejected his attorney. When Judge Burnett calmly reminded him that she had attended law school and that he'd had a taxpayer-funded attorney who withdrew at his request, Vaughn grew combative. The exchange escalated when Vaughn told the judge to shut up. Judge Burnett firmly responded by ordering bailiffs to take him into custody. At that moment, Vaughn stood up, grabbed a chair, threw it across the courtroom, and charged directly toward Judge Burnett's bench. Deputy J.R. Ray, the bailiff, immediately intercepted Vaughn, and the two men crashed to the floor in a violent struggle. As they wrestled on the ground, Ray began screaming that Vaughn had grabbed his service weapon. Roxborough police officer Trey Wright, who had been testifying as a witness, rushed down and saw Vaughn in possession of the bailiff's gun. Wright fired 4 shots, striking Vaughn in the chest and ending the attack. Vaughn was rushed to Duke University Hospital but died from his gunshot wounds on the 10th of September 2021. The bailiff suffered a gash on his head and scratches on his neck, while Officer Wright sustained a broken hand during the confrontation. Judge Burnett later stated publicly that she believed the actions of both law enforcement officers saved multiple lives, saying there was no doubt in her mind that Vaughn would have killed every single person in that courtroom. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation conducted a standard review of the officer-involved shooting and found the use of force was justified and within policy. Case 9. Brian Nichols. This is Brian Gene Nichols, a 33-year-old former college football player with a history of violent behavior. Nichols was on trial for rape and other serious charges stemming from incidents in August 2004. The charges included allegations of forcible rape, aggravated sodomy, and false imprisonment involving his ex-girlfriend. During his first trial, which ended in a hung jury, Nichols had attempted to smuggle homemade weapons into the courtroom by hiding them in his shoes. Prosecutors discovered the weapons and requested enhanced security measures, but these requests were only partially implemented. The legal proceedings for Nichols' retrial were scheduled to begin on the 11th of March 2005 at the Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta, Georgia. Superior Court Judge Roland Barnes, a 64-year-old widely respected jurist, was assigned to preside over the case. On the morning of March 11, Deputy Cynthia Hall escorted Nichols alone to a holding room to change from his jail jumpsuit into civilian clothes for trial. Nichols overpowered Deputy Hall, stole her service pistol, and beat her into a coma. He then made his way to Judge Barnes's courtroom, entering through an unlocked door from the judge's chambers. Nichols opened fire immediately, shooting Judge Barnes multiple times and killing him instantly. He then shot court reporter Julie Ann Brandau to death. As Nichols fled the courthouse, he encountered Deputy Sergeant Hoyt Teasley and shot him multiple times, killing him. Nichols carjacked multiple vehicles and continued his rampage by killing U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent David Wilhelm. A massive manhunt ended on March 12 when Nichols took Ashley Smith hostage in her Duluth apartment. Smith convinced Nichols to surrender peacefully. Prosecutors charged Nichols with 54 counts, including 4 counts of felony murder. Nichols pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming he was gripped by a delusional compulsion. The jury rejected this defense, and on the 7th of November 2008, they found him guilty on all 54 counts. The jury later spared him from the death penalty. Nichols was sentenced to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole and is currently incarcerated at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification State Prison. There is something that happens to a parent when the person who hurt their child gets to just keep living their life. Something that no courtroom, no sentence, no apology can fix. And every single person on this list reached that point and decided they were done waiting for someone else to handle it. This is parents who killed their child's killer in court. Number 1. The mother who shot her daughter's killer. So this starts in Lübeck, West Germany, on March 6, 1981, and what should have been a regular murder trial turned into something that nobody in that courtroom was prepared for. A 30-year-old single mother named Marianne Bachmeier walked into room 157 of the Lübeck District Court with a Beretta 70 pistol she had smuggled in, walked straight up behind the man on trial, and fired 7 shots into his back. 6 of them connected. He was dead on the courtroom floor in seconds. To understand why, you have to go back about 10 months. May 5, 1980. Anna Bachmeier was 7 years old and had gotten into an argument with her mum before school, so she decided she just wasn't going that day. She left the house and ended up at the home of a neighbor she already knew, a 35-year-old butcher named Klaus Grabowski. She had been there before, actually. He had cats, and Anna loved playing with them. So when he invited her in, she did not think anything of it. What happened next was horrific. Grabowski held Anna in his apartment for hours, sexually assaulted her, and then strangled her to death using his fiancée's pantyhose. He packed her small body into a cardboard box and left it on the bank of a nearby canal. Now, here is where it gets even worse, because Grabowski had a whole history that the system had completely fumbled. In 1973, he got a probation sentence for strangling a 6-year-old girl. Not jail, just probation. Then, a few years after that, he molested 2 more young girls, and to avoid prison for that, he voluntarily agreed to castration in 1976. But by 1978, he had quietly started hormone therapy to try to reverse it. So when Anna came to his door, he was exactly who he had always been, and the system had basically handed him back everything that made him dangerous. The same evening he killed Anna, his own fiancée went to the police. She had found out what he did and turned him in. In custody, Grabowski admitted to the killing, though he denied the sexual assault. And his explanation for the murder was the kind of thing that would push any parent to a breaking point. He said Anna had tried to seduce him. He said she threatened to tell her mother he had touched her unless he gave her money, and that he killed her because he was afraid of going back to prison. That was the story he was going to stand up in court and tell, about a 7-year-old girl. Marianne Bachmeier had not had an easy life before any of this. She grew up with an absent alcoholic father and a violent stepfather, and her mother eventually pushed her out of the house. She had her first child at 16 and her second at 19, both placed for adoption. Anna was her third child, and by everyone who knew them, Anna was the absolute center of her world. Marianne ran a bar called Tipasa in Lübeck, and people described Anna as this happy, vibrant little kid who was always around. The months between Anna's death and the trial were brutal. Marianne was falling apart. When the trial finally opened on March 4th, 1981, sitting there day after day and watching the defense argue that Grabowski's actions were caused by a hormonal imbalance, while knowing this man was about to take the stand and repeat his lie about Anna in front of everyone, something in her made up its mind. On the evening of March 5th, she overheard a conversation that made her believe Grabowski would be making a formal statement the next morning. She later said the thought of him lying about her daughter one more time was what decided it. She went home that night and got the gun. The next morning, around 10, she stood up, walked toward Grabowski from behind, pulled the Beretta out of her purse, and fired. 7 shots. 6 hit him in the back. He died almost instantly. She lowered the gun and didn't resist when the officers came for her. Judge Gwenther Kroger spoke with her right after. He recounted her, saying, "I wanted to kill him. He killed my daughter. I wanted to shoot him in the face, but I shot him in the back. I hope he's dead." Later, when a doctor asked her for a handwriting sample, she wrote, "I did it for you, Anna," and drew 7 hearts next to it, 1 for each year of her daughter's life. Her trial started in late 1982. Initially charged with murder, the prosecution eventually reduced that to intentional manslaughter after all the evidence came in. Her defense argued she had not decided to pull the trigger until the moment she believed Grabowski was about to lie about Anna on the stand. And they also placed serious blame on the Lübeck authorities who had approved his hormone therapy, pointing out that without that decision, Anna would still be alive. On March 2nd, 1983, after 28 days of proceedings, she was convicted of manslaughter and unlawful possession of a firearm and sentenced to 6 years. She served 3 before being released on parole in June of 1985. Marianne sold her life story to the magazine Stern for 100,000 Deutsche Marks to cover her legal costs. After her release, she married a teacher in 1985, moved with him to Lagos, Nigeria in 1988, where he worked at a German school, and they eventually divorced in 1990. She moved to Palermo, Sicily after that and worked in a hospice for a time before being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She came back to Lübeck, the same city where all of it happened, and died there on September 17, 1996, at 46 years old. She was buried next to Anna in Bergtor Cemetery in Lübeck. And if you think that tested the limits of what a parent will do, the next case is something else entirely. The father coming up did not walk into a courtroom, but his vengeance was in no way less. Number 2. the father who hunted his daughter's killer across continents. Before any of this happened, Andrzej Bamberski was genuinely the last person you would expect to become a vigilante. He was a quiet, religious French accountant, soft-spoken, rule-following, the kind of guy who just trusted the system. That version of him basically stopped existing on the morning of July 10th, 1982, when the phone rang at 10:30 and his ex-wife told him their 14-year-old daughter Kalinka was dead. The story goes back to 1976, when the Bamberski family settled in Pekbusk, just outside of Toulouse. 5 houses down the road lived a German cardiologist named Dieter Krombach, a widower with 2 kids of his own, charming, well-liked, and someone Andrzej had no reason to distrust. What Andrzej didn't know was that Krombach's first wife, Monika Henze, had died in Frankfurt in October of 1969 at just 24 years old, hours after her husband had injected her with something. No charges were ever filed. Krombach remarried within 10 months. An affair started between Krombach and Andrzej's wife, Danielle. By 1977, they had both left their spouses and married each other, and Kalinka and her younger brother Nicholas went to live with their mother and Krombach in Lindau, a small Bavarian town on Lake Constance. Kalinka attended a French-language boarding school in Freiburg as a day student and spent weekends and summers at the Krombach house. She was almost 15 that summer, barely spoke German, and was counting down the days until August when she would finally move back to live with her father. Everyone who knew her described her as sporty, outgoing, full of life. On Friday, July 9th, 1982, Kalinka spent the whole day windsurfing on Lake Constance, came home, had dinner with the family, and went to bed when Krombach told her to switch off the lights around midnight. That was the last anyone would see her alive. The next morning, Krombach came downstairs in his riding clothes and found her dead in bed, already in full rigor mortis. She had been dead for hours. He tried injecting stimulants directly into her heart and legs, then called emergency services. The autopsy later established she died somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning. When Danielle called Andrzej that day, she relayed 2 theories from Krombach: heat stroke from the day on the lake, or a delayed reaction from a car accident back in Morocco 8 years prior. Andrzej was flawed. His daughter was a perfectly healthy teenager. None of that made any sense. 3 months later, he got a copy of the autopsy report and understood why it bothered him so much. It showed injection marks on Kalinka's arms, right leg, and chest. There was a vaginal tear, fresh blood, and a substance consistent with semen on her legs. Her stomach contents were undigested, meaning she died very shortly after eating, which blew apart Krombach's timeline entirely. She had vomited while unconscious. And then there was the detail that haunts this case most, which is that during the autopsy, Kalinka's genitals were removed and were never returned. When Andrzej had her body exhumed in France 3 years later, they were still missing. That evidence was gone for good. The German prosecutor looked at all of that and closed the case. Andrzej spent years trying to get someone to reopen it. He brought in independent experts who confirmed that the cobalt iron compound Krombach admitted injecting Kalinka with right after dinner would have caused an immediate adverse reaction, not hours later the way Krombach claimed. He hired prominent criminal attorney Rolf Bossi to push for a formal trial. The case reached the higher regional court in Munich in 1987 and came back the same way. Insufficient evidence. So Andrzej quit his job, burned through his savings, and kept traveling to Bavaria to monitor Krombach's movements. In 1983, he walked through Lindau during Oktoberfest, handing out flyers with Kalinka's photo, directly accusing Krombach of rape and murder. Krombach sued him for defamation and won a judgment of 500,000 German marks. Andrzej refused to pay a single penny. Meanwhile, Krombach was still practicing medicine and living freely in Bavaria. Then, in February of 1997, a 16-year-old patient came to his clinic for an endoscopy. His assistant was at lunch. Krombach administered anesthesia and raped her while she was unconscious. He admitted to it at trial. Several other women came forward with the same account. He got a 2-year suspended sentence and lost his medical license, then kept practicing anyway at clinics across Germany by showing a photocopy of his revoked license. Caught in 2006, sentenced to 28 months, served 11, released early. France had tried Krombach in absentia in 1995 and sentenced him to 15 years. But the European Court of Human Rights annulled that verdict in 2001 because he had never been able to defend himself in person. France even paid him 100,000 francs as compensation. Germany refused every extradition request that came its way. And here was the brutal reality Andrzej was living with. France had a 30-year statute of limitations. If Krombach was not physically on French soil to stand trial by 2012, the case was permanently closed. André was in his early 70s, had been conned by multiple people who took his money and disappeared, and was running out of time fast. In 2009, he was staying at a hotel in Bregenz, Austria, about 10 minutes from Scheidegg, Bavaria, where Krombach was now living. He was watching the man's routine and talking openly to anyone around him. Word reached a Kosovar-born bartender in Bregenz who contacted André, said he wanted to help, asked for nothing in return, and said it was for humanitarian reasons. André insisted on covering expenses. They scouted Scheidegg together. André pointed out Krombach's home and then went back to France to wait. On the evening of October 17, 2009, a woman's voice with a heavy German accent called André at home and told him to get to Mulhouse. That same night, 3 men grabbed Krombach outside his home in Scheidegg, beat him badly enough to fracture his skull, bound and gagged him, drove him through Austria and Switzerland into France, and left him tied up on Rue de Tilleul in Mulhouse, 4 blocks from the police station. An anonymous call went out to police, the caller putting on a Russian accent, giving the exact street. Officers found a 74-year-old man beaten and bound on the pavement. The first thing Krombach said when the gag came off was, "Bambursky is behind this." Police found 19,000 euros in cash in André's hotel room. He was arrested within days. Germany demanded Krombach back and the extradition of Bambursky and all 3 kidnappers. France refused everything. In October of 2011, Krombach was convicted of causing intentional bodily harm, resulting in unintentional death, and sentenced to 15 years, after multiple women testified he had drugged and assaulted them as teenagers, using those same injections. The European Court of Human Rights upheld the conviction in 2018. He was released on medical grounds in February of 2020, transferred to a nursing home in Lower Saxony, and died there on September 12, 2020, at 85 years old. He never confessed to what happened to Kalinka. André was tried for organizing the kidnapping in May of 2014. He confessed fully, said he felt a moral compulsion to act, and believed he deserved a full acquittal. The court gave him a 1-year suspended sentence. He walked out free, said he was a bit disappointed by the result, and did not appeal. Nearly 30 years. His job, his savings, most of his relationships. He did not stop until it was done. So the next one is a little different from the others, because Eduardo Gallo did not pull a trigger, did not hire kidnappers, and did not walk into a courtroom with a gun. What he did was arguably harder than any of that. He closed his business, walked away from his career, and spent over a year doing the job the police completely refused to do. Number 3. The father, who became a detective. It was July 9, 2000 in Tepoztlan, a resort town in the state of Morelos, Mexico, about 90 minutes south of Mexico City. Eduardo's 25-year-old daughter Paula was spending the weekend at the family's vacation home with her friends. She had just finished her bachelor's degree in psychology and was working toward a master's in psychoanalysis. People who knew her said she was the kind of person who would drag you into a heated debate about criminal behavior in Mexican society the second you sat down, which, given what was about to happen, is almost too painful to think about. A group of men hopped the fence surrounding the property that night, broke into the house, and terrorized the young women inside for 2 hours. They stole jewelry, clothes, and 2 cars from the driveway. And they took Paula. Eduardo paid the ransom, $18,500 in cash plus jewelry. Everything he could pull together, handed over, because what else do you do? And then, a week later, on the day of the ransom exchange, something went wrong that changed the entire shape of this story. An unidentified group opened fire on the kidnappers at the exchange, killing 3 of them. 2/3 of the ransom money was found sitting right next to their bodies. The kidnappers took that as an ambush and murdered Paula in retaliation. Her body was found nearby a day later. She had been shot in the back and in the neck. 3 suspects were arrested fairly quickly, but the man who actually pulled the trigger, known in the gang as Apache 2, was still out there. Eduardo went to the Attorney General of the state of Morelos. Nothing. The police treated it as one case among hundreds, all equally brutal, none particularly urgent. Months passed and nothing moved. So Eduardo Gallo shut down his hotel consulting firm and started investigating himself, with 0 experience doing anything like this. For over 11 months, he worked without a single day off. He interviewed local residents, people living on public land near Tepoztlan, and other kidnapping victims in the area. He studied the ages and personal connections of local criminal groups and how they operated. He analyzed phone records and chased physical leads across state lines. He later found in his research that up to 90% of kidnappings in Mexico are never even reported because victims are terrified of violent reprisal. He was working in a world where almost everyone around him had every reason to stay silent. But he kept going. Eventually, he traced one of the kidnappers to a payphone that had been used after the kidnapping in the town of Tultitlán in the state of Mexico. He brought that directly to the authorities and let them take it from there. Police set up a stakeout and waited. 28-year-old Francisco Zamora Arellano was arrested and confessed to Paula's murder. Eduardo later published a book called Paula, Denunciation of a Kidnapping and of a Corrupt Society, and became a public advocate for reporting crimes in Mexico, arguing that every unreported kidnapping made the next one easier to commit. That became his whole mission after all of this. He did not take justice into his own hands, and honestly, that is what makes this case stand out among all the others on this list. After paying the ransom, losing his daughter anyway, watching the system ignore him completely for months, he still handed the killer over to the police instead of handling it himself. At his daughter's funeral, he said, "I will always love you, my adored child." And that is where this one ends. The next case, though, is where things get really raw and in the moment, because this father didn't have months to process anything. He had about 30 seconds to understand what he was looking at inside his own home, and everything that followed was completely unplanned. Number 4. Dad saves his son, son saves his dad. This was just a regular Tuesday afternoon in Daytona Beach, Florida, on July 18, 2014, and 35-year-old Jason Browning stepped out of the house to grab something to eat. He left his 11-year-old son at home with Raymond Frolander, an 18-year-old who had basically become part of the family over the years. Frolander lived with them. He and the kid played video games together all the time. Jason had zero reason to think anything was off, so he left, came back, walked through the door, and the look on Frolander's face stopped him cold, and then Frolander's pants dropped to his ankles. Jason went absolutely feral. He beat Frolander until he was unconscious on the floor, and by his own admission he did not stop. But then he paused, dragged the body across the house, went to the kitchen and got a butcher knife, because apparently a full beating was not feeling like enough for what he had just walked in on. He told reporters later he was going to kill him. He fully intended to. And then his 11-year-old son stepped directly in front of him. The boy looked his dad in the eye, said one word, and shook his head. That was all it took. Jason, standing there holding a butcher knife after beating someone unconscious, put it down. He said later he did not want to traumatize his son any more than he already had been, so he called 911 instead. He told the dispatcher he had just walked in on a grown man molesting his son, and that the man was currently in a bloody puddle on the floor waiting for officers. And at some point during that call, still standing in the room with Frolander, Jason addressed him directly and told him he was lucky that Jason was a God-fearing man. Frolander was taken to Halifax Medical Center, treated for his injuries, and then taken straight to Volusia County Jail. When police questioned him, he immediately said he was guilty. Under further questioning, he admitted he had been molesting the boy for 3 years, starting when the child was just 8 years old, and that he had threatened him with terrible consequences if he ever told anyone. Daytona Beach Police Chief Mike Chitwood made it clear immediately that Jason was facing 0 charges, saying the father walked in on his son being abused in his own home and did what any father would do. The internet very much agreed. Frolander's mugshot went completely viral, and you can probably imagine why. In April of 2015, Frolander pleaded no contest to lewd and lascivious molestation of a victim under 12, which carries a maximum of life in prison, and Circuit Judge Leah Case sentenced him to 25 years. He will be registered as a sexual predator for the rest of his life after release. Outside the courthouse, after sentencing, Jason told reporters that Frolander was going to spend the next 25 years learning exactly why Jason chose to let him live. And then he also revealed publicly that he himself had been a victim of sexual abuse as a child. He said he knew exactly what his son was going through and was not going to pressure him to talk before he was ready. Outro. And so that is 4 parents. 4 completely different situations, 4 completely different ways of reaching the same breaking point.